Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Sometimes I listen to that introduction and I think, are they saying I'm crazy? Feels
This
like it.
meeting is being recorded.
Oh, it's nice to know. Anyway, I want to start out by saying happy week of Father's Day. For some reason, I was thinking today was Father's Day until last night. I was looking and I'm going, no, it's not this week at all. It's next week. But I may not be with you next week, so we're going to celebrate all week long. How's that go? All right?
All right, here we go.
All right.
Good.
Okay. So, the science of mind teaches us the concept of God or spirit is an infinite. And physics teaches us that energy is neither created nor destroyed, but constantly transformed. Physics is confirming the nexus of faith and science. You see, the spirit is the energy science recognizes. And faith interjects an additional element, intelligence. Unlike what is commonly accepted as human intelligence, the intelligence of spirit is not a group of bespectacled, bearded old white men lounging about in a book-lined mahogany enclave of higher education, contemplating the finer points of recent developments in academia. Holmes writes that this spiritual universe must be one of pure intelligence and perfect life, dominated by love, by reason, and by the power to create. And he writes that this seems to be an inevitable conclusion. Holmes is informing us that the energy of the universe exists with a purpose, raising it beyond simple physics into a realm only recognized by the introduction of faith into our understanding. Holmes is telling us energy is life itself, and that life is hardwired to create. And by create, let me suggest that this implies transform. Since energy is known to transform, rearranging atoms in effect to create itself a new version, create from itself a new version of itself. Energy can transform, it can't be destroyed, it simply rearranges its atoms. Holmes is saying that this energy is dominated by love. And this is evidenced by its unblinking response to our directions to create whatever we believe we should experience. Holmes expresses too that reason is possessed by this life energy. It is logical to accept some element of reason within this life energy, since it can, number one, discern our belief, and number two, cause the appropriate rearrangement of atoms to demonstrate a suitable response. Unfortunately, spirit's ability to reason does not extend to being able to discern between what we want to believe and what we do believe. The love Holmes ascribes to spirit is unconditional, comparable for us humans only to the love experienced by dog owners whose litany of sins goes unrecorded and unaccounted for by their loyal companions. When the title Big Fish, Little Fish was revealed to me, it was accompanied by that classic picture I think most of you are probably familiar with of a big fish about to consume a smaller fish. In this image, the big fish could be representing spirit being fueled by each of our individual expressions being absorbed into the whole. It could also be us absorbing the cornucopia of beliefs that make up our common consciousness. Holmes writes in the textbook that health and sickness are largely externalizations of our dominant mental and spiritual states. Holmes is reminding us that our state of mind is often reflected in our physical condition. When we lose our conscious connection with spirit, we may experience depression. Knowing internally that we are off track, we look for solutions in our physical world. We feel something isn't right. And since we've disconnected from spirit, we look for a solution in the physical world where we think we exist. And we may find it in food, for example. Food may offer comfort, but comfort foods are rarely healthy choices. We may look for relief in pharmaceuticals, and they may provide some relief, but they're only a smokescreen solution. They're not removing the problem, they're simply masking. Our physical bodies pay for our choices in the form of sickness or deterioration. Although our conscious connection may be short-circuited, our subconscious connection is unbreakable, so that ever-loving life energy receives our misinformed beliefs and creates for us the experience we directed. We have fed ourselves false information and affected our being by doing so. Likewise, maintaining our conscious connection more easily allows us to discover choices that lead us to healthy outcomes. When we remember that we are in fact simply energy being transformed into the bigger fish, that we are the bigger fish, we recognize our responsibility to be as the big fish is, loving and constantly reforming ourselves in acts of love. When our big fish self has injected too much junk fish, we can suffer the consequences, or we can change our diet. We can turn off our favorite news channel and watch kitten videos on YouTube for a while. You'll feel better, trust me. We can stop feeding our fears and remember the tools at our disposal to re-energize our conscious spiritual connections. We can go back to the basics as we did last month and talk about spiritual mind treatment and meditation. We can go silent and listen for that inner voice that guides us, reminding us that, yeah, junk food feels really good in the mouth and it tastes really wonderful and has some temporary soothing effect, but in reality, later on, not so much in the good department. And then we feel worse about ourselves because we don't like the way we look or we don't like the way we feel. And then we need more comfort stuff and we start looking for other things and we get onto that downward spiral of feeding the fear, feeding the discomfort with stuff that just makes us feel worse. We can treat ourselves to little fish who align with spirit, who love unconditionally and transform with joy and gratitude into big fish experiences. Ken Wilber talks about stages of human mental development in his book, A Theory of Everything. He writes, the care stage, which generally lasts from age 7 to adolescence, is centered on the group, family, peers, tribe, nation, he says. The young child steps out of his or own limited perspective and begins to share the views and perspectives of others, so much so that the child is often trapped in the views of others, hence conformist. Here the big fish is the prevailing common consciousness. The individuality of the little fish is swallowed up by the big fish, and the little fish is lost in the greater identity. This differs from the previous situation in that the individual is no longer striving for the good of the whole, but suppressing itself to conform to a whole that may or may not be fully aligned with spirit. One of my teachers often shared the story of the person who came to her center and said, I really like what you're saying. I like what I'm feeling when I'm here. I love the people. But I don't see anything, I don't see any rules. I don't see any list of rules, things that I need to do to be a good religious scientist. And she kind of laughed and says, there are no rules. You are responsible for your own experience. You're responsible for your own relationship to spirit. You're responsible for knowing how it works and then making it work for yourself. And she said the person came back only a couple more times, and finally he actually wrote her a note and said, I'm sorry, I just need some rules to live by. I need someone to tell me what to do. And that's not who we are. We're here learning the science of mind to learn how this spirit thing works. Knowing that if we listen to that inner voice, that is the booming voice of the God power guiding us to make choices, which we have the full power to do, to make those choices which create positive experiences in our lives. When we listen to that inner voice, pay attention and choose healthy, spiritual, loving choices, we prosper. When we ignore them, it's basically a gamble. Sometimes you can ignore it and things may work out fine. More often than not, we're going to find ourselves looking for love in all the wrong places and finding experiences that are not rewarding to us. In the conformist mode, we go along to get along. Peer pressure prevails. We must be good. We must follow our rules. And if you follow our rules, you'll be rewarded. And if you fail to follow the rules, if you fail our test, punishment will follow. Wilber goes on to write, whereas dominator hierarchies are the means of oppression, actualization hierarchies, this is strange, actualization hierarchies that bring together previously isolated and fragmented elements is the growth element. When we bring together new ideas and digest them, we grow because we are learning. Ideally, we grow through this stage, this adolescent stage, and we see this as evidenced by well-recognized teenage rebellion stories. The hippie movement of my generation, the beatniks before that, the flappers of the 1920s, etc., where people looked at the rules they had grown up with and decided they needed to move outside of those rules. There was something beyond that experience that they needed to explore and find for themselves. We grow out this, and our sense of identity reemerges with a reasonably developed balance of self-importance and community responsibility. We become responsible adults, well-adjusted, able to move into the next generation of leadership and bring along our children as we grow. By reestablishing our identity after absorbing a variety of diverse ideas, testing them against our spirit matrix, and discarding anything out of alignment with spirit, we form a foundation on which we can stand firm in support of a world that works for everyone. Holmes writes again in the textbook that what we demonstrate today, tomorrow, and the next day is not as important as the tendency which our thought is taking, the dominant attitude of our mind. We may, in the course of our life, consume all types of little fish, and no one in particular is all that important. But favoring one variety or another is going to bend the curve of our experience. When we choose to align ourselves with spirit, we can expect experiences that reflect those choices. When we ignore spirit in our choices, spirit does not ignore us. It simply creates for us what we choose. Holmes writes, suggestion has proved that the subconscious mind acts upon our thoughts. When we consciously disconnect from our spiritual truth, when we make choices that are not in alignment with spirit, our subconscious mind is still connected directly with spirit, and spirit acts on that. So our goal in this journey of life is simply to feed our subconscious mind on loving thoughts and grow to be a big, fat fish who knows only joy and gratitude when it is our turn to nourish the next bigger fish we encounter.